Hello. You're all muted.
Apparently.
There you
Hi.
go. I couldn't hear a thing.
Yeah, well, it wasn't you.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
the joys of Zoom calling. Something always happens.
There you go.
That's okay.
Makes things more humorous, that's all. We get to laugh a little more. That's not, not a bad thing.
True.
Happy Tuesday, everyone.
Happy Tuesday.
Hello, Jocelyn.
The sun was shining.
Yes, still is a little bit.
Yeah. Sky is blue. Snow is melting.
Sunday is daylight savings time.
Are you kidding me already?
I am not. Yeah,
Oh,
already.
I am not prepared for that.
It was early. Is it
Thank
normally
you.
April?
They keep changing it.
Well,
I don't know. Robert, what do you do to prepare for it?
I have meetings with people over in Taiwan and people in Germany. And what happens is I schedule a meeting, and because they changed their clocks at a different weekend than I do, my meetings, I've literally showed up to a meeting an hour late because of things. So I need to know in advance when these things happen. Thank you.
It's been like this for a few years now.
Yeah, I just wish I wish for those countries who do change, I wish we all changed at the same time, but it doesn't work that way.
All right. Well, it's 5:31. I think we have a quorum. I think I see 5 of us on here, in addition to Rebecca and Jocelyn. So welcome, everyone. Happy Tuesday. And we're a small group tonight. I don't see any members of the public on here for public comment. And so we can move to the minutes of February 8th and then our special meeting February 23rd. Thanks for sending those, Robert.
Yeah, no problem.
I'll start with the 8th.
Did anyone have any questions or comments about the minutes or changes? I don't know if I'll let Jocelyn scroll because some of you might not have been able to look at them ahead of time.
We'll do a slow scroll.
Jocelyn, I guess the only question I have is just in terms of, we talked about all those projects and we approved that one expenditure. So just curious as to how, when we will be dealing with other things on that list.
Great question. So spending that kind of money is actually quite a bit of work to organize and get things like quotes from vendors. I've started in on a few things, which have proved to be a little more challenging and complicated than I had hoped. For example, the awning above the exterior book drop. seems like it should be an easy thing, but because there is some scaffold where the brick has like 3 corners because it like goes in, and the fact that it's right at the top of the stairs creates a big challenge with snow and ice and adhering it to the building because it's not a flat surface. So I'm working with 2 companies right now. One is Lakeside Glass. They do exterior things on that. And they'll also be giving me a quote for some of the UV light window protectant. And it's looking like it's going to be more than $10,000. And for anything that's above $10,000, I need to do a due diligence of 3 bids. So these are going to be coming throughout the year, probably somewhat slowly.
So you'll let us know when the time is ready.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, and there's a few other things like, let's just say one other thing, like I'm getting a quote for the room divider and the Archer room. We have those big swinging doors from 1990 that divide the room. They're very difficult to use and somewhat unsafe. So I'm getting a quote for that. Things won't happen all at the same time. So it's not like we'll be able to look at the whole menu and say, okay, let's spend this and this. I'm looking at quotes for the things that were prioritized first. And then just kind of trying to tick them off one at a time. A lot of times with little projects like this, it's hard to find vendors that want the job because right now they're not really thirsty for work because construction is still booming. And so little projects like this aren't, $10 or $12,000 project isn't that much compared to like a new build where they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we don't have dedicated facility maintenance for city facilities. So it's really me trying to find who was willing to do it. So I'll keep you posted as they come up.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
These meeting minutes are too long. Somebody should tell the person writing them that this is too much.
It's good to be thorough, Robert. This is a public record.
Yeah,
you do a good
they're just
job.
very
Robert.
detailed. You do a very good job.
Sometimes I wonder whether it's a good thing, but yeah, so it is a little long. I was being facetious, but not totally. Anyway, did anybody see anything that needs to change or be cleaned up?
I didn't. I thought they looked fine. Anyone else have any additions or changes?
I'll move approval of both.
Did you want to take a look, a slow scroll through the 23rd? These are shorter because it was just one item.
Then one item, apparently I can turn into 3 items. Okay.
So we have Art's motion. Do we have a second? Second, Cindy.
Great.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All right. Our vendor reports.
All right, Jocelyn's going to pull up January. So as you remember, we've been a little behind with our months. And once again, unfortunately for February, I'm still waiting on City Council approval of the last round of bills. So we will push that back and hopefully next month we'll be caught up. But to bring you back in time to January, you can see this is a month where we really see a lot of tail end of the previous year and then spending into the next year. And so I noted for you kind of which was being coded back to 2021. And I think on that first page, the only thing I really wanted to point out, if you scroll down, we had that large fee, almost $82,000 to South Central Library System. That is our annual link services fee. And so this is for all of our delivery services coordinated through South Central Library System. Also some tech fees. And also fees for our ILS, which is our integrated library system. This is how we access the catalog and you access patron records and your library card. That is all through that ILS through South Central Library System. And then let's see what's on the other pages. I think just under 490, I wanted to point out starting in January, that is when we start to see all of our spending in the programming account, which is really exciting. So if you remember, we have shifted programming from being supported fully by the Friends to now being part of the city's operating budget. So you can start to see some of those charges in that 490 account starting in January. I think those were the only things I really wanted to point out, but I'm happy to answer any questions if anything stuck out to you.
So is the 81,000 for 2022 or 2021?
2022.
Okay.
If it is, if I did not note 2021, then it's 2022.
Are there any other questions? Do we have a motion to approve the vendor report?
So moved.
And a second?
This is
Thanks,
Robert.
Cindy.
Oh, Cindy got it. Great.
Cindy raised her hand. Yep, there we go.
Perfect.
All
Okay.
those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, and we'll move our February one to the next meeting and continue to just keep catching up.
I know. Jocelyn, I don't know if you have, yes, I was going to say, this is that funds held outside the city spreadsheet that we do every month as well, just to show you where our funds outside of city, what is held with the city, where those are at. So we have our foundation held with STLS, and we had some really nice, generous donations in January, over $10,000.
Wow.
Yeah. Which was wonderful. So you can see the balance of those holdings go up significantly. We're at almost $15,000. And we've talked previously about two of those donations, which were for naming rights for the murals. We had another $5,000 donation with unattached to a naming right, and a $300 donation. And then the endowments went down slightly, I think just with the market. And the Friends, this is the disbursement to staff in the State Bank of Cross Plains account, which had mainly been used for programming previously, but now the Friends are funding those extras. They're continuing to fund those extras for the library. So that includes money for staff, for things like staff in service or recognition, and some administrative functions like movie license, some of those little extras they continue to fund. So that is what that about $6,000 is.
We can talk a little bit more about the Friends later on in the agenda. This is also kind of leads us into the next agenda item. If you don't mind, Mary Beth, if I can just roll that right in.
Yeah, perfect.
So Thanks to Rebecca for keeping track of all this in one place. Previously, we've had a lot of cleanup happen in the 204 fund. That's the revenue fund for the city. There's still one thing left in there. That is the Katie's Kids Memorial Fund. But we've gotten all of our gifts and revenue that's non-public tax dollars to the place now where we're really starting to look at how do we help our money make more money? In other words, how do we start investing our gifts and donations in such a way that it benefits the short and long-term future of the library financially? So this right here is really the foundation for that and allows us to really look at how we have begun to really create some diversity within that foundation that will then allow us to work with the South Central Library System Foundation, or perhaps the Madison Community Foundation, along with the Friends of the Library, perhaps, to really look at where can we maximize our long-term growth. This is a really judicious thing to do, regardless of whether or not we have long-term financial goals. In the event that we would be looking at a capital project or some sort of major building campaign, already having those funds and investments in place before we even get to that process, I believe is a really wise and very responsible thing for the library board and us to be looking at. So, Mary Beth, do you want to talk a little bit about the treasurer's role and how that sort of started and where we're at right now?
Mm-hmm. So originally, when I first joined the board, actually, we only had 3 officer positions, president, president-elect, and secretary. As we were approaching the development of the next chapter campaign, and with that, we added the role of the treasurer for more of that look through helping with the donations and fundraising. And it's different than like a typical treasurer position in that it's not running the natural or the normal day-to-day finances and going into Cassell and stuff. That's for Rebecca and Jocelyn in the city department, but really looking at our gifts and donations. And so now that we've made it through the next chapter project, Jocelyn and I have been talking and just what could the role of the treasurer evolve into, and might it be someone in that role, since it's been vacant, as we've kind of been trying to determine what that role should look like. And could that role then be someone who could help us doing research for investments and ways for us to manage our gifts and donations in a way that can help build on those as investments.
So a couple of things that the treasurer could assist with or that we could explore sooner than later is each year we receive or have the option to receive the disbursement of interest off of the endowments. So I just received a letter from the Madison Community Foundation about what that will look like. And out of the regular endowment, we are looking at an optional disbursement of $9,938.98. And out of the large print, $1,339.05. So this could be an area to explore. Do we receive that money and invest it elsewhere? If so, where and how? Do we let that money sit and say no thanks to the disbursement this year, allowing the endowment to build? Another example would be what do we do with the Katie's Kids Memorial Fund? That's not listed right here because it's still held with the city. This was a memorial gift that was in place before I started at the library. There was quite a bit of designation attached to that donation. And I worked a lot with the donors when I first started on expectations around what that would look like and just sort of some basic communication. But right now it's not accruing any interest at the city. It's just sitting there, and it's about $25,000, and it's something that the family is still donating to. So having that held at the city, now that we have that whole 204 fund cleaned up, it's probably not the best place. I don't necessarily have any recommendations right off the bat, but as we're looking at all of our investments as a whole, that's an exciting piece that could really have a big impact in the long-term financial future of the library. So things like that. When it comes to like the statements and reporting, we're finding that, you know, Rebecca and I have to do those things anyway, so it doesn't make sense to have the statements sent to a trustee, just to have them sent back to us, just to then report out at the meeting. So we're really looking at large, bigger picture strategy and intent. And some of that then monthly maintenance would most likely continue to happen by library staff.
Jocelyn, are you thinking that, and Mary Beth too, I think that the potential exists to attract a trustee who has, I think back when I was president, you and I talked about this a little bit, and it just wasn't, that's just when we were getting into the foundation and stuff, but to have a trustee who has that, and that's not uncommon on boards, to have somebody like that in that advisory capacity. So I know you don't always have a whole lot of influence on who's selected for the board, but is that something that you think might be a good idea?
Yes, absolutely. I would love to see a diverse set of skills and interests and levels of advocacy on the trustee team. And that is definitely something that at this point I have zero control over.
Yeah, I know. But there certainly are. I mean, I know of other boards and stuff where somebody who did this sort of thing for a living. My husband, for example, is on the APT board, and that's what he did for a living. And he provides that kind of advice to them as a member of the board. So it would be, I would think it would be really nice to have a library board member trustee with that same kind of background.
I did speak with Bill Burns, our city finance administrator, about, you know, how involved does he want to be as the city finance guy in library gift investments. And he said that as long as he's kept abreast of any updates through email or quick updates, that's fine by him, because really this is the library board's responsibility, authority, and agenda. It has nothing to do with tax dollars.
Right.
So we're already doing everything that we can at the city level with public funding in terms of interest. Right. So, and we don't really have any capability to invest public funds. So we're really just talking about the gifts and donations. But right. Yeah, you know, I really appreciate Art's attention to detail when it comes to the finances and the great questions that you ask, Art. As you know, working with the Friends, there's a lot of opportunity here in the future to be able to join forces around investments. I am not an investment guru, so this is fairly new territory for me. And I would definitely look to experts in the field, or perhaps a trustee in the treasurer role, to be able to help lead those recommendations for the rest of the board.
I guess, can I make a few observations?
Please.
So the positions on the library board, as you said, are not within your control. Mm-hmm. And, so in terms of having a trustee who's in charge of investing, it's going to be hit or miss in terms of having an appropriate person available to the board. And so, whereas you may want to designate a treasurer to, in a sense, oversee what's going on, I think you don't want. My sense is, I would not want to risk having a treasurer, one person, making decisions about what to invest in. But I think having one person overlook the investments that are going on is an appropriate job for the treasurer. And
I wasn't talking about a person making decisions. I was just talking about having somebody knowledgeable that can give you advice.
well, even that depends on what their experience is and who's available.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So I was on a different board, not a private board, and we had an endowment fund that would contribute spin-off money for operating funds, but we established a separate fund, which was a capital fund that could be used for projects. It's a separate fund, and the rules of governing it were different, and it was done through a like community foundation. And so the investment decisions about what to invest the money in was made through the community foundation, much like our general endowment fund is now. But we had an investment oversight committee to review, to make sure what was going on with that money, to follow through on a fiduciary responsibility. So we, as our board, weren't deciding we're going to invest in IBM or AT&T or whatever. We were just saying, is what they're doing appropriate? And
Right.
also, but it meant that we were one step removed, and therefore, as people came and went on the board, you still had the backstop of the experience of the community foundation people who are knowledgeable in investing to do the right thing. And I think so that one fund that's at the city that isn't making any money or interest, one of the things you might think about is taking that out of the city and approaching the community foundation and saying, we want to keep the name of this fund the same, so the family doesn't lose that. But we want it to be something where if we have a project that we need money for that project, we can remove it. The rules are different than it would be for the endowment fund. And I don't know how this community foundation operates, whether that's a possibility or not. The other thing that does is for donors who want to donate money, they know that it's going into a fund that's governed by the rules of the community foundation. It's not somebody deciding that they want to take a flyer on a risk. So the money is not going to be lost or thrown away. So that gives them more confidence to making a donation into that sort of a fund, because they know that there's a lot of people, a lot of eyes on it. So that's just my thoughts off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm. And you're kind of describing what we're thinking, right? Almost the treasurer acts as like a liaison or someone who helps do research and gather the information, not making the decisions themselves necessarily. And I think we wanted to bring it up tonight since it's March, knowing that, we have a little bit of time to keep developing the idea and the role, and then be ready then when it's time for just the normal nomination for the new slate of officers. So we've got some time to be developing. So if people think of more ideas or things we should be considering, you can let Jocelyn and I know too.
Sure.
I think if we're kind of looking at some of our next steps, I think it would be to reach out to each of the institutions that we're already working with. So MCF and the SCLS Foundation. The SCLS Foundation uses, I believe it's First National Bank. So
And that's currently the one where we have the most interest right now, Jocelyn?
it is. Yep, it is. And that is overseen by the SCLS board. And our library board originally chose to go with that foundation rather than creating our own foundation because the interest rates were really great and they managed the fund with very nominal fees. And then we didn't have to create another board. If we were to create another foundation, it would be another registered nonprofit and we'd have to have another 3 people on the board. And so it's another board. So it's really a nice way to facilitate the growing of gifts. It's also a really nice foundation because we can withdraw at any time and we hold a minimum balance, I think of like $500 or $1,500. I can't quite remember. So like for next chapter, it worked out really great because unlike the endowment where you're growing a base and then receiving a disbursement off the interest, the foundation, you can withdraw up to that minimum at any point. So it's a lot more fluid. So I would probably start with reaching out to those institutions first and just learning a little bit more about what some options are, and then also probably reaching out to some other library directors to see if they have any advice.
For my meeting, I just a quick question for my meeting minutes. Remind me, MCF, is that Madison Community
Yes.
Fund or Foundation?
Madison Community Foundation.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So more on that in the coming months.
All right, moving on to a little bit of policy work.
Yes.
Acceptable or appropriate library use.
Yes. One moment here. I did not have that document open yet. I missed that one. Let's see here. All right, thanks for your patience. So before Courtney left the library board, we had been looking at every 3 years, looking at our policies just to make sure that we were compliant, up to date, relevant, and continuing to constantly look at the rules and procedures and regulations that help to govern the library. It's challenging to look at one policy without looking at the other policies because they're very interwoven. But this was one that we identified as needing an update. And the other one that is still on deck is the creation of a privacy policy. So one of the reasons that this was in need of an update was one, it was somewhat outdated. The last time it was reviewed was just several years ago, but we only amended one section relating to truancy, indicating that the procedure for staff should be to contact the truant officer or the PD if we have kids in the library outside or during school hours that aren't at school. We are, of course, not going to do that. We're not going to call on kids, especially because we don't know if they're homeschooled. And this last year, of course, that blew out wide out of the water with remote learning. So as library staff have been learning more about racial equity, social justice, when is an appropriate time to call the police, training around how to recognize when someone is having a mental health crisis or is experiencing a psychotic event or is under the influence of drugs or alcohol, how to keep the building safe. We continued to come back to what was then called appropriate behavior policy. So I'll just kind of take a quick cruise through this and talk about a couple of the changes. I have the gallery of everyone's faces minimized so I can see the screen here. So please interrupt me because I may not see if you raise your hand or make an expression. So the purpose of this is guided under State Statutes 43. And it's really to ensure the safety of all library staff and patrons and to protect the usefulness of the materials and just to maintain order. We're committed to providing an atmosphere where people of all ages are welcome. And open spaces in the library are social spaces and may be loud at times. That was something that we've added. As libraries have changed to more community centers, we do not shush people. We encourage people to have connections and conversations, and it's nearly impossible to police noise levels in an open space with huge ceilings. And so rather than fight cell phones and kids gathered around computers, we really want to lean into the noise. And while we're not encouraging, total raucous behavior, we want people to be able to connect and use the library together. So we also recognize that there's an importance in our increasingly noisy world to have places that are designated respite. And so the places that we can control the noise are within the MAC reading room and the lower level local history room and the study rooms to the best of our extent. So those are the designated quiet spaces. So that's the big change for item B. Inappropriate behavior includes any activity that disturbs others, interferes with library operations, damages the building, profanity, or general behavior kind of considered unacceptable in public places like nudity. This policy applies to all patrons, and we very much take the approach that all patrons are treated equally at the library, regardless of age. And so in the event where we would have, let's say, some really loud teenagers being extra disruptive or using profanity, that's how we approach a situation like that. We would say, you have the same rights as adults in this library, and we expect everyone to be able to use the library respectfully. So all ages in a safe environment. We have some basic language in here. Instead of having a huge long list, and you can kind of see over on the right here, we listed out all of the things that you couldn't do at the library. We kept it to just the really important stuff, like no smoking, no sleeping, weapon-free environment, and theft. So kind of just the big things. We're not going to outline, I think we had, no shirt, no shoes, intoxication, profanity, loud, boisterous, obscene behavior, defacing public property. We had staff review this policy and really say, what are the big things that you feel like would need to be in this policy? What would your recommendation be to me as a library director? And what are the things that we just don't need to spell everything out? We added in that no pets are allowed unless they're an ADA certified animal. Fun fact, this includes guide dogs and miniature horses. I've had one time I've had a miniature horse in the library, and they actually called ahead to ask if they could to bring them. This was in Colorado, and we were all very excited. But that's the one and only.
Can I ask?
yeah.
So is the miniature horse a comfort animal, or how does I mean?
No, it's essentially a guide animal, and similar to a dog, and is often used for a cart or like a pack animal, like it would carry a pack.
Okay.
This was a former rancher that lived out in the country in Colorado and had a miniature horse as his ADA animal that had like 2 saddlebags.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. That's quite interesting.
Yeah. We've had people, this is really common in public libraries, birds, cats, snakes, reptiles, all kinds of things that people try to bring into the library. So if we keep it to ADA compliant, then that covers our bases. And it's something that we should really include in the library, in the policy, because it is a federal standard.
Yes.
Other general guidelines, I took out a lot of our procedural things about handling problem patrons. Again, a lot of that negative language we took out. And really that comes down to staff training around de-escalating situations, becoming a mental health first aider, and knowing when to call the police. And then this last section deals with unattended minors. This is a section that we often need to use our best judgment on, and often falls to the responsibility of the supervisor in charge, especially at closing time. So again, we took out a lot of our procedural things. We discussed the age limit of 8 years old in the library. I talked with a couple of parents about that age limit. We have we're in a residential neighborhood right on the edge of downtown. We have a lot of kids that are about 8 years old that come to the library either by themselves or with their friends, or they have younger siblings with them. And the general consensus was that 8 seemed like it was a fine number to stay. This is the youngest that I've ever had in a library. It's usually between 8 and 12 is the age limit. And then we've also discussed procedures for closing. This is generally where the unattended children comes in to play procedurally in regards to the policies at closing times. It's not uncommon in libraries for the library to be closing. It's the middle of winter. We have a procedure that we start 40 to 30 minutes before 8 p.m. or whenever our closing time is. So we try to be as proactive as possible about that approach and offering a phone. So we do everything we can to avoid that situation. But in the event that it does happen, we would work with the police department, making sure that child got home safely. Any questions?
I thought it looked really clean, and I was just looking at the version that was not marked up, it's just the final version. Seeing what was struck, I agree completely that this is a better version than maybe what our first attempt was a few years back.
Good. Yeah, we want, when we talk about appropriate use of the library, we don't just want to tell people what they can't do. We want to demonstrate and provide the avenues for what they can do. Kind of like Canadian road signs, if you've ever driven in Canada. It's not just don't go this way, no turn. It's what you can do. So this is a little bit a bit of a departure from some old school language and gets more towards the philosophies and services of a 21st century library.
Now I need to go to Canada to see the signs. Question. I think it's titled well, but I did note in the article you sent along today, they talked about being careful about the word appropriate and who defines appropriate, and is it tied with what's appropriate for the way I think of things, but is very different for different groups of people. Is there any concern or problem from a DEI, EDI, whichever acronym you use, philosophy about appropriate library use?
That's a great question, and I think worth a discussion. We could absolutely strike the word appropriate and say use of the library policy or guidelines for the library. I am definitely open to discussion there.
I'm not opposed to it, but I mean, the good thing is I'm thinking about it, and I think we're all trying to think about it. I would welcome other thoughts, but just dropping the word seems like we're leaving a gap. Guidelines maybe does help. So do other people have thoughts on this topic?
I like guidelines. It sounds.
Library use guidelines?
No.
Let's see what that looks like. Oops.
So I definitely agree with the taking out appropriate. I think that's necessary for exactly the reasons that you were saying, Robert. Just you're thinking of leaving guidelines and policy. I was going to say, because replacing guideline with policy is a different weight to it.
Right. I think it's
when you're talking, yeah.
I was wondering the same thing. How does this read? I think it's a little cumbersome, but it's more the intent, I think, that we're going for, and I think it still spells out the intent. Library.
I like it better. Yeah, I like it better if you leave the policy in there, because it is a policy.
Right.
And that's a softer way of saying it. So that's fine with me.
We might have appropriate, I mean, like C, section purpose, 1C, I guess, inappropriate behavior. Again, if we're looking for this word, we might, I'm not.
This is also a self-imposed deadline. This doesn't have to be approved right here at this meeting. If you wanted to take a little bit more time, especially as we get into the discussion of the equity statement in relation to that article that I just sent today. So I'm no pressure. If you'd like to wait. But if you feel like it's in a good place and you're satisfied, then the action is yours.
Can we, I don't know if you have the ability to do a global search for like APPRO and just see, I found that one just by looking. I feel like there might be one or two other places where we have appropriate or inappropriate.
difference in my mind between having it in the title and then
Yeah.
having inappropriate here is we're being very specific.
That's true. I guess I just want to see
Inappropriate in the
how-
title was ambiguous, inappropriate, and here we're listing what is inappropriate. So in my mind, those are two different things.
I think you're probably correct. Is there any other use of the word appropriate that people have seen as we're scrolling down?
I don't
Because
think.
again, it might be fine in one paragraph and less fine in a different paragraph.
I think it was just those two places.
I feel pretty comfortable that it's a good document. It's going to get changed again sometime in the future, no matter what, because these are living documents. So I feel pretty comfortable that we could move this forward tonight if others are accepting of that. So I would make a motion to approve the library use guidelines policy.
Jean, I see your hand raised.
Hi, thank you. I think the policy as written is great. It's positive, while, articulating what's acceptable, what's not. I still have a problem with the title. I feel like guidelines and policy are in conflict with each other. I think that, this will sit alongside other library policies. So I guess I'm suggesting maybe, library use policy, or maybe library use guidelines and policy. I don't know, but I feel like the two words next to each other are kind of in conflict.
I feel like I hear what you're saying, and I don't even disagree. I'm thinking it as guidelines almost as an adjective.
Mm.
Library use guidelines policy. It's the library use guidelines policy. And I don't know if that works or if that helps, because I get what you're saying too, but I actually don't like the idea of saying library use guidelines and policy.
Yeah,
That makes it sound like we're mixing
right.
a guidelines with and a policy, and then which is which, and the whole thing is the policy. But I value what you said, and I kind of agree that guidelines policy is a little bit confusing or cumbersome. Well, does it work if we do just say library use policy? Then it's the problem with that is that's such a bland title. That it's almost like it's not even clear on the face of it what we're talking about. I don't know. I'm also willing to move on tonight and make the decision another night.
All
Are
right.
there any?
I'll
Oh,
move
go ahead, Art.
I'll move to table to next month.
So we had a motion to approve and we had a motion to table.
And my motion was not seconded, so I'll write it that way. Does anybody want to second the motion, Art's motion to table?
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a first and a second to table and move it to our next meeting. Any other questions or discussion?
Can you send this out as email so everybody has it? And with the alert that it's going to come back next month?
No problem.
Yeah, great.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you, everyone. Great discussion, great suggestions. I really appreciate our conversation about that. So since we don't have any committee updates, we can move on to the liaison updates. And we'll start with you, Robert, with City Council.
Well, I'm quickly coming to the end of my city council career, but the big thing that I just got to participate in, and actually so did Jocelyn and Rebecca, we had a chance to meet and greet with the candidates for the city administrator position. And then on Saturday, there was kind of a full day thing where we were actually interviewing the various candidates. And I know we made our recommendations and the process is moving forward, that, you know, so assuming that everything goes well, you know, a candidate will be offered the position and a candidate will accept that position. And we should shortly have a new city administrator, although there's still debate of whether that person would start working for the city prior to Mike Davis, our current administrator, leaving the role to go into retirement. So that's kind of the big thing that a number of us have been working on. And I'm very happy with all the candidates that we had available to us, but some did float to the top, I would say. And I can't go into more detail than that until things are publicly announced.
Thanks, Robert.
How many people did you interview, Robert?
There were 4 finalists, and prior to that there were, you know, some semi-finalists and information that we were reviewing on even more candidates, but 4 finalists, and you know, they all had strengths, but like I said, a few maybe kind of had more strength than others, so there was 2 in particular that floated to the top. So hopefully either our first choice will accept the position, or if not, the second choice will accept the position. We'll see how that goes.
I'm hopeful that it will be on the council agenda for Tuesday.
It may be, I haven't seen ahead, I guess.
Friends update?
I was not able to attend the meeting, but Kristen is here. If she would perhaps want to give the.
Sure. Yeah, our update is basically, so at our meeting, really just a couple things. So we approved the library director's request for some 2022 summer reading program funding. So Jocelyn had a request for a few items for some money for that. So that got approved. We have plans for utilizing the Little Green Light program that the library's used in the past and used for the building campaign, whose name escapes me at this moment. But so we're going to start utilizing that a little more to streamline some of the membership data we have with friends. We already paid for the library subscription and have in the past. And so we have plans with Jocelyn and Rebecca to do some training for some of our people to be able to do that. And then the only other update is we've got a subcommittee together to over the next couple months update our bylaws. They're very out of date, so we want to make sure our bylaws are updated, strike any out of date info and anything unnecessary. And then there's very little on roles for our board, so we're going to try to add some more info on the various committees we have and roles of the various officers and the like. So I think that's basically it. Unless Jocelyn has anything to add, she was there.
No, I don't think so. Just that we really appreciate the continued support for the Friends, especially for the big extra things like summer reading that have a huge impact. So when we're looking at kind of our bang for our buck with the friend support, summer reading is at the top of the list. It's one of the biggest things that we do all year. It has a broad reach, and staff have been working really hard to reinvent the program and create a more inclusive approach. So more to come on that next month.
Yeah, I just wanted to say staff are really excited and thankful that you've approved that. It's going to allow us to do a lot of really nice extras this year. Some big prizes, a nice kickoff event, some more outreach materials. So that it feels great to have the friends support those special things that we would not otherwise be able to do.
We're happy to do it. So
Thanks so much. For school district updates, I think the biggest thing that's happening right now are some community conversations. Some of you have even attended them, so thanks for joining. There are 2 left if you're interested. Dana Minogue, our superintendent, along with our assistant superintendent of operations, Lori Ames, mostly lead them, giving a presentation about school finance and the current forecast for our school district budget. It's information that we want to get out into the community and then also get feedback from the people who attend. So there's a presentation and then an opportunity to participate in some small group focus conversations where we gather feedback on the school district budget and ideas and feedback from the community to see if there would be support for an operational referendum in the fall. Hasn't been fully decided if that's the way our board will go, and that's why we want to do these sessions to get information. There would be more information forthcoming if that is something that they decide, but that's the kind of one of the most biggest things happening right now. Information, if you did want to join any of those sessions, is on the website, and I can also help too if you need more information. So that was what we have from the school district is the most timely. Anything from the community? And then our equity, diversity, and inclusion efforts. We have a draft statement from our work group. So thank you to Jean, Rose, and Corrine, I believe. Am I missing anyone who helped draft that? And I'll turn it over to them, maybe do a little bit of explaining, and then we can maybe go through our process if there's any feedback, and then we can kind of talk about our vision for where this might live and how we might use this moving forward.
Yeah, it looks like Rose and Corrine are not here this evening, right? So I will speak on their behalf, on our behalf. So we started some initial conversations with Jocelyn and you, Mary Beth, and so we hashed out a number of concepts that we wanted to be reflected in an equity statement for the Middleton Public Library. We wanted it to reflect a dedication to social justice, diversity, equity, inclusion principles amongst our staff, collections, services. And the other thing that, and this was something that Jocelyn mentioned, is on a page. And how would we, reflect that in the statement itself? So I think we're interested in feedback from everyone. Does it cover, does it cover the areas that we need to cover? One of the things that we included was the reference to the inclusive services assessment that is available through the Department of Public Instruction, and it was developed for libraries in Wisconsin by librarians in Wisconsin. And so that sort of gets at the the action part, or one of the pieces of action for this statement, and offers a framework for looking at policies, staffing, collections, programming, services, all the things that libraries do and are about, and questions that we might need to ask around whether those, services and policies work for everyone. And so using that as sort of a springboard for discussion, not just within library staff, but within the board too, because there are probably lots of areas that, there are lots of areas that libraries cover, but these are not necessarily visible to the public. So I guess I'll leave it there, and I invite comments, suggestions from the board. Are we headed in the right direction? And then in light of the, tabling the other policy, I'm wondering if maybe we should give people a little more time to digest this one as well. For example, I didn't have time to read the article that you sent out today, Jocelyn. I really would like to take a look at that, and then this policy through maybe another lens.
Yeah, I think this is a great start, and I would like to have time to kind of read through it and think through it myself. So maybe that's something we can do offline as we're reviewing the other policy.
I think that's a good suggestion. I think too, what might also help then as people take more time to think about this is like, where would this live? How would we use this? That might help give some context. So I think, in talking with Jocelyn and like Jean said, right, that it's important that we have this, but we don't just want it to be words on a page. How do we live this? And one thing I was thinking of too is also, how do we help the public know that this is where we are as well? And so perhaps this could be on the page where on the library is the library board page. Perhaps this lives there as like the top piece of our library board. Here's a statement. And then as we make decisions, as we review our policies, bringing this back into our meeting, making sure we're looking at things through this lens. So those could be options for how we might tend to more operationalize this. So things for us to maybe consider as we take more time with it. Art, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I want to, what you just said is what I was thinking as well. And I guess I wonder if there should be a Roman numeral 4 with implementation as a piece of the document, so that, I think what the document says is great, but I share your thoughts about making it visible, and so people know that we're not just saying this, but we're actually doing something. And I think the implementation, having that stated in some fashion, might be really helpful. My other observation, if I remember correctly, under Roman numeral 2, the inclusive services assessment and guide is like, I can't remember. It seemed like when I looked at it, it seemed like it was like 100 pages or a lot of pages to go through, and it's not an easy thing to go through. If we were really going to go do that, I think we would take like a weekend seminar to, all weekend thing, where retreat, where we'd have to really go through that. So am I right? It's a long document with multiple pages and multiple questions, and is that correct?
It is. It's a lengthy document. There's a lot of detail. And with topics that will require, discussion and reflection, I think. And Jocelyn, I'm guessing you have embarked on some of this already.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was very timely that I literally was reading that Library Journal article today, and it is specifically meant for library directors and trustees going through this process. So I think slowing it down a little bit, again, this is a self-imposed deadline. We really like to, as a staff, to take things slow and be very deliberate. And I think in doing that, we can dial it back just a little bit. It's not something that we need a deadline for. We certainly don't want to rush it. I think all of the questions and discussion so far has been very insightful and very thoughtful. Implementation is a really great question, and also feedback. How do we want the public to engage with this? How do we want the staff to engage with this? And a lot of those things are also outlined in that article. So I think that would be a really great thing to read through, and then come back to this. In terms of the format for this, I think we want to be careful that we're not formatting it the same as a policy, because it serves a different purpose than a policy would. So maybe the formatting and structure looks a little bit different. So yeah, I think further discussion and some study would be great. I also just want to say thanks, Jean, and Rose and Karine and Mary Beth, for picking this up and really running with it. This was something that started as an initiative from past trustees. And it's not easy work, and it's difficult, not only difficult work, but it's also a challenge to pick up where someone else has started and left off. So thanks for leading the way on this.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. Obviously, for friends, haven't read the policy, but as far as Art was saying about implementation, just wanted to reiterate what hopefully is obvious for all of you, that the friends, if there is an implementation section, are both willing and eager to be supportive of any implementation of that, in addition to actually being in the policy as part of that implementation. So just wanted to make sure that that was stated.
Thank you for your support, Kristen. So I think this is on as an action item. So do we have a motion to defer this to our next meeting? And then in the meantime, we can all take more time to process and reflect.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All right. And then
real
we'll
quick,
move.
for my,
Oh,
my
sorry.
notes, no, just who made the motion, who seconded?
Cindy was the first, and I think the second was that you, Teresa?
Nope, it was Jean.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
With my
Thank you
my
both.
faces are minimized, so I was
know.
going by
Thank
who I
you.
thought I heard. All right. Our director's update.
All right. Not quite as many pictures this month. I always think that I'm not going to have much to share in the month of February because it's such a short month, and then we really pack it in. So we've been, over the last couple of years, really working on some initiatives that we're really starting to see come to fruition. And the work with the YWCA and the Restorative Justice Program is one of them. This is just starting off and will be hosted at the main level programming room, formerly the retail space for the bookshop. So between Mondays with the restorative justice program, that's in collaboration with the school district, SRO officers, the Middleton Police Department, and our Middleton municipal judge. Referrals will be meeting together from 4 to 6. And then also on, I believe it's Tuesdays, Wednesdays, or maybe Tuesdays and Thursdays, I can't remember exactly. We have the Next Chapter high school student tutoring group meeting and tutoring younger kids. So this is a really good example of using space for public partnerships and offering another option besides just the lower level community meeting rooms that are somewhat out of sight and no windows and not as conducive to crucial conversations that happen as part of the restorative justice program. So that's something that we have to give a lot of kudos to Liz Zimdars for helping to organize and continuing to serve as the staff contact for that. The library in the park is continuing to be wildly successful and hugely popular. We are tomorrow, if you're free, from 1 to 2:30. We're trying to target days that we know parents and caregivers may be looking for something to do and really get the biggest bang for our buck out of the venue. So tomorrow at Lakeview Park, kids can come in all ages, choose a book, make a craft. And then we partnered with the Middleton Outreach Ministry to provide snacks. Part of the purpose of these reports every month is not just to look at what happened in the previous month, but to look ahead. So the down the road section is where I'm using or what I'm using to kind of look forward to how the work within these focus areas is demonstrated and coming to life. So the City Council recently approved a contract with Language Line for city use. This is a translation service that provides services over the phone, in-person translators, also includes American Sign Language and print, if I hadn't said that already. Oftentimes, languages are an invisible barrier. We don't necessarily know what the language someone speaks by just looking at them walking through the door, obviously. And oftentimes if someone is not fluent in English or English isn't their first language, they're not necessarily going to come up to the desk and engage with a staff person. Right now, we don't have any of our, other than our library card application, translated into any other languages, nor do we have any of our directional signage in throughout the building, like restrooms, meeting rooms, lower level, that sort of thing, in any other languages besides English. We did that somewhat purposefully as we started a blank slate with the redesign of all of our wayfinding. And now that we have a service like this, we can start to really dig into and have some consistent support for what are the languages that, for example, Parks and Rec or the Senior Center are finding that they need translated, and how can we join forces on that? So if someone speaks Korean, they know that when they go to the Senior Center, materials are going to be in Korean, and when they come to the library, same thing. So we'll be able to move towards some consistency there. So staff training on that is coming soon, as it was just approved last week. Heads up. Yeah.
Not to interrupt, but I work in my day job. One of the things that we try to do for some of our products too is come up with iconography that doesn't always require translation. So I would always recommend, so that you don't miss, like, oh, we got these 7 languages, but miss the Hmong community, or we missed this group. It's like, well, you use a symbol, maybe you don't miss anyone. So.
Yep. That's a great point. Also really important for anyone who may not be literate in their home language as well.
Yeah, great.
Mhm.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, no, please. Thank you. That's great. Big news around voting. We have the Dropbox right in the library parking lot right as you pull in. This was news to me. I knew this was being discussed. But thanks to our city clerk for pushing out this information that absentee ballots must be returned in person by the person who was voting. So if you, for example, like in my family, we did absentee ballots and my daughter and I walked my husband and I's ballots and dropped them off. We're no longer able to do that. So please spread the word. And this is a good example of how the library can help support successful voting.
Maybe this is already going on, but I will talk to our clerk maybe tomorrow to make sure that the actual physical box outside in the library parking lot basically gets blocked off or something. We have to figure out something. I don't want to even confuse people to think that this is a good way to vote and then have them be shocked and appalled that their vote was not cast.
They do have a process in place, and they're not able to block off the box because it's also used for taxes and bills.
Okay.
So it's a Dropbox that's used for multiple purposes, which is quite efficient when all of those multiple purposes are open access. So it sounds like they have a process in place, but it, of course, isn't a bad idea to follow up and get more information to help share in your district.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. We, of course, ended the mask mandate along with the rest of Dane County. And the city is moving towards strongly encouraging rather than requiring. We're finding so far that about half and half of people that are coming in from the general public right now are continuing to wear masks. Most of the staff is wearing masks while providing service on the public desk or the public floor, but not in our staff spaces. So that's something that, we'll continue to support and encourage. And of course, we have masks available for anyone that would like one. Next week, we have a really exciting exhibit. The founder of MADAM, which is Women in Tech, especially focused on women of color in tech, has been working with Dane County Libraries on a Women in STEM exhibit. So I'm really curious and excited to see what this is going to look like. I think we're going to set it up, and Rebecca, you might know, around the railing and the elevator tower, I believe.
Yep, that's the plan. And they will be unique posters featuring different women in STEM. That will be unique to our library. So people who are interested in this exhibit can visit all of the libraries that will have features and be able to see something different everywhere.
Thanks. February wrapped up our winter reading program, and the winter reading program this year was a good example of several things. One, restructuring and formatting the program so it's more intergenerational and family friendly, so families are encouraged to read together. Excuse me. And then offering really fun book lists that helped you achieve your bingo, that linked right off of the website to the catalog, and had really interesting and diverse categories. So February, even though it was a short month, including all of our outreach, online, virtual, and in-person programs, we offered a total of 70 programs with 1,354 attendees. Earlier in February, all city department heads were trained on the use of a software program called Polkol. This is actually a local Middleton company that's based downtown here that is internationally recognized for their surveys. This is something that we can absolutely use to gain feedback from our community, and something that we'll probably be looking at later this year as a follow-up to that survey that I shared at the last meeting. Some fun stuff. We celebrated 2/22/22. This was a really stormy, wintry day, so we didn't have as many people participate in the backdrop as we would have liked. But then we had this really fun picture from a regular patron, and really appreciated her sharing how she used this photo to spark joy in her family. We also had several new staff added to the library. Ed, Helene, and Lily are all pages, and Beth is our newest 20-hour library assistant. And continuing to support multi-languages, we've making progress with the murals, which is super exciting, and we can't wait. These are all of the languages that will be included, and we will have a translation posted next to each of the murals. I'm really excited that we were able to work with the Interpreters Co-op, who reached out to all of their translators for these languages, who offered the translation services of the words welcome and gather, along with a few others like friends and read and thank you and books, in case we ever needed those in the future, all pro bono. So that was really, really generous. And I'm thrilled that we were able to also include Ho-Chunk and Ojibwe. And then in other hiring news, we just finalized an offer, drum roll please, to our new deputy director, Catherine Clark. Catherine was one of 2 in-person finalists that we invited for an interview, a tour and lunch with the library and library staff. Catherine hails over 15 years of public library experience. She's worked in a variety of Madison libraries, McFarland, and is coming to us from the Beloit Public Library, where she is in charge of all ages programming. So she will be starting on April 18th. And we also have open, which closes this Sunday, the head of youth services. Hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers that if we can move through the interviewing and hiring process successfully and meet our time goals, the new head of youth services, along with Catherine, can start together. We went from over 4 FTE in youth services down to one lowly but mighty librarian, Katie, who is holding down the fort for all things youth services, with support from Amy Perry, our outreach librarian, and Liz in adult services. Rather than post right away for the vacant FTE and the part-time positions, we've decided to, again, go slow and be deliberate with our hiring, and allow the new head of youth services to hire their own staff and build their team. So those positions will be posted later in the coming months. And we'll be working hard to get our youth services team back up to staff. I think that was all that I had from the roadmap report. Any questions? All right, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jocelyn. So our next item is to take action in order to do a closure for Staff Development Day.
This is Robert Burke. I would make a motion to approve a staff development day for Friday, April 29th.
I'll second.
And with that comes, yeah, an all-day closure, if I didn't say that.
And Teresa made the second motion. Are there any questions or discussion?
I have a quick question. Is that something in the past? I remember coming to some of those events. Is that something we'll have the opportunity to do?
Yep, great question, Cindy. This one is focused on operational procedures. Our theme for the day is let's reintroduce ourselves. So it's really focused on staff teamwork and new services like the new format for the summer reading program. We'll be opening up the meeting rooms for public reservation shortly thereafter, and we'll be training staff in how to use the new technology and new procedures. So this particular one is really geared towards staff. However, I'm hoping to do about 2 of these days a year. And I'd like to have one of those days each year be something that trustees and maybe even the friends could be involved in. So later this year, we're hopefully looking at an active shooter training that will include a live scenario. And so that one is probably going to be more relevant and geared towards trustees.
Any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 All right. There isn't new business listed on the agenda, but in speaking with Jocelyn, and she kind of mentioned too, with that staff development day, they're, starting to learn how to use the new systems and for the checkout for the meeting rooms. And one thing that has been on my mind is just thinking about us as a trustee team. And we've been meeting virtually throughout the time of COVID. Wondering if May might be a target where we want to try to resume in-person meetings. Gives us a little bit of time between now and May to kind of see how things are going with COVID. At that point, the meeting rooms and the tech will be ready for us to use. And so I wanted to just pose that idea out there so people can think about that.
Can I ask? I have a quick question. I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember exactly which month my term is over. I'd love to meet in person before I leave.
May would be the last one, Cindy.
All right, let's do it.
Cindy's in. So yeah, think about it unless anyone has big objections. That might be a good timeline for us. So one more virtual and then resuming in person in May. I think too, with the size of the meeting room, we can easily distance our spacing. Masks for those are welcome for those who prefer them. So I think we can do it in a safe way.
Mm-hmm. Mary Beth, I have one other new business item that I promised Mike I would ask.
Sure.
If there's discussion on the meeting. I do see Teresa has her hand up.
Yeah, and
Oh,
I
I
think
missed
Jean
that.
had hers up first.
Okay.
Jean, if you want to go ahead. Or is that up from before?
Maybe that's just up from before.
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
I'm continually raising my hand.
My question is just knowing that the room is going to be able to be set up for hybrid, then is that an option if there are some people that for scheduling or whatever reason can't come in person? Or if we say we're in person, is that like, really we want everybody there in person?
I think ideally we want everyone in person. I think we have the tech where we could try a hybrid. I think it's just really hard to manage that. I do think you bring up a good point though, if we're thinking about, as we're coming back in person, years ago we had done 5:30. Originally, I think the board met at 6. We had moved it to 5:30 because people on the board at that time were also needing to do other city committees that were meeting at 7 on the same night. So I think we could discuss too, is 5:30 in person still reasonable? Might people want to do a different time, a little bit later, 6 o'clock, 6:30? I think we could be open to revisiting the time too, if that would make it easier for people.
I think your question about hybrid is really a good one though, Teresa. And as everybody wants to try and do hybrid, and I've participated in a variety of different hybrid situations. I find that as a participant, hybrid works really well when doesn't need to be a lot of discussion, when it's more of a presentation style meeting. But that's definitely something that as we finalize the tech, we can experiment with.
I guess I'll just hop in to clarify. I'm not a huge proponent of hybrid. I actually kind of push against it in my day job a little bit, because I don't think it should be something we do because we can do it. And so that my question is more clarifying, do we really want people to be in person? And if so, let's be really transparent about that. Recognizing there might be times when we want to use the technology because that makes sense, but just being transparent that, yeah, maybe we're not going to do hybrid because we can do hybrid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'd just like to make the
Good
comment
point.
that all of this is predicated on no new variant suddenly coming on the scene and no new resurgence with people going without restrictions and going crazy without restrictions. So yeah, I think May is a good time to shoot for. It gives us a couple months to see what's going to happen. And if things look great, yeah, we can do it in person. If things are iffy, then we might say, well, we thought we could, but it isn't going to work. And we'll just have to wait and see.
That
Yeah,
certainly
and
has
that
happened
was-
before.
Yeah, and that was the thought with kind of setting May as maybe a target. I think it's far enough from when some people might be doing spring breaks, and that, gives us some time. So we're, have some space there. And then of course, yes, if things drastically change, then, we can revisit that idea and then wait. But I'm optimistic that May be the time I get to see some of you in person. What was your other new business, Jocelyn?
Yes. So just earlier today in my staff meeting with the city, Mike Davis wanted me to inquire about an ad hoc committee and a library board member participating that might serve with the bus transit. So let me just bring up this email really quick and I can forward this to you as well, but let me just read it out loud here while we're all together. Okay. So Mayor Brar and Alderwoman Olson from Abbey Attune, thank you for taking the time this morning to explain the intent of the ad hoc transit circulator committee. Our staff is enthusiastic that we have support from at least 2 elected officials to expand transit services in Middleton as we've identified deficiencies. I spoke with Daphne, who's also in the planning department, about staffing and anticipated 3 meetings for an ad hoc committee, and she graciously accepted. Daphne is very passionate about transit and has the benefit of also being the only City Hall employee who utilizes Metro Transit for her commute to work. She has a list of appointees. She will circulate a doodle poll, set up a meeting. It seems like it may be possible that this committee will prefer daytime hours. that some representatives are attending on behalf of their employer, but Daphne can include daytime and evening hours in the doodle poll. So this is in relation to the changes that are happening with Madison Metro and how they're impacting Middleton. And the city staff, especially Abby and Daphne, have been working hard to create a circulator route that goes through Middleton. So it looks like here is what Alder Olson was suggesting as representatives on an ad hoc committee that it sounds like would meet about 3 times and then be done. So we've got a question mark here by the library, and Mike asked if I would pass this along to see if any of you would be interested in participating. Is this of interest to anyone?
I think it's important. Does anybody use transit? Because that's like, I've been involved with this for a few years now, and I think it's really important that Middleton has its own solution that meshes with Madison's system. But I'm embarrassed to say I don't have a lot of firsthand knowledge of the needs of the city and where a circulator would need to go to best represent and service our community. If anybody has a better take on it, you might be a better candidate.
Well, I think part of the issue for the library was access for people who have no transportation of their own, who want to get to the library and get home again. There's no way to do that reasonably. So it's part of it was came up from what I recall under equity and inclusiveness and access. So that was how it impacts the library.
Right. Yeah, the goal is that a circulator would not only feed people into the Madison bus rapid transit line, but would also get people from point A to point B within the city of Middleton and back home eventually, using the same circulator route.
Right.
Which would allow, as you said, people who don't maybe normally get to the library to have a way to get to and from the library. I would love to be on this committee, but I won't even be a member of the library board in a couple months. So if somebody else is interested, I think it's an important committee to have our voice heard.
And I won't be a member of the board either, so
Yeah.
it's got to be somebody else.
I would be happy to also forward this email to everyone because we do have some trustees that are not here this evening. And I can still tell Mike that I ran it by you at the meeting.
Great.
That's a great idea, Jocelyn.
Okay. All right, I'll go ahead and do that then.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Anything else before we close? All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
This is Robert. I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you
too.
very much.
Nice to see you. Have a good rest of your week.
You too.
Bye.